I've always loved nostalgic 90s 2D JRPGs, and I've often wondered what those games might look with modern HD graphics. So I decided to make a small interactive demo to explore that idea. Because I didn't have much time, I focused on what I think is the most iconic part of those games: combat. I originally planned to animate attacks for every character, but time only allowed me to finish the wizard magic attack and the imp's damage animation. So in this video all you can really do is to electrocute the poor imp over and over again. Everything you see here was drawn entirely in Inkscape, using just a keyboard and mouse, no tablet involved. The animations were created in Blender, also with keyboard and mouse, and everything was then put together into an interactive mockup using the Godot engine. The goal of this video is the same as always: to encourage artists and developers to consider Inkscape and vector graphics for game development. I'll show you how I built each part of this demo, from the artwork to the animations, and finally integrating everything into Godot, and hopefully demonstrate just how powerful vector-based workflows can be for games. But before we get into that, if you're interested in learning how to actually draw and animate all of this, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I have a ton of step-by-step beginner tutorials covering character design, game art, environment design, and animation, all made with beginners in mind. And if you really want to learn and master illustration in Inkscape, make sure to stay until the end. I've got something you'll definitely want to see. The first thing I did to define the focus of this project was to design the characters. I knew from the start I wanted 3 iconic archetypes, with proportions inspired by classic JRPGs, with big heads and chunky bodies, but maybe with a more modern HD cartoon feel that works especially well with Inkscape. For the night I was very focused on the proportions and on capturing that old school feeling. I had early Final Fantasy in mind, especially Final Fantasy I, with its very generic, almost symbolic characters. Because of that, I feel this design ended up being a bit short on personality. Stylistically, it does what I wanted, but if I had more time I'd probably redesign it, maybe by showing the face to add more character. For the assassin, I knew I wanted a female character. This time, learning from my mistakes, I tried to balance that generic hero look with a bit more uniqueness and personality. I decided to obscure half of her face and give her a long red scarf, inspired by that ninja guy from the Shinobi games. Once again, I don't think I fully nailed what I had in mind. With more time, this is another character I would definitely revisit. For the wizard, I was able to apply everything I learned from the first 2 designs, and this time I focused on personality first. I made him a bit goofy, with a long head, glasses, and a hat that's just a little too big for him. This is the character I'm the happiest with, and it's the main reason I choose to animate him instead of the others. When it came to enemies, I wanted classic Final Fantasy-style monsters, at least one humanoid enemy, a flying creature, and of course a slime. You can't have a JRPG without a slime. And with that, all the characters are done. Even though I'm not 100% satisfied with every single design, seeing them all together ready to fight really gives me that classic JRPG feeling. And in the end, that's exactly what I was aiming for. Next, I moved on to the background. At first I planned to keep it simple and make a generic forest scene, maybe using my free Inkscape starter pack, which includes a lot of nature assets. I'll leave you a link in the description if you're interested. It's completely free. But then I thought, I almost never do interiors, so why not use this project as an excuse to try one? I'm a big fan of animated shows, and when I work on backgrounds, I always study how they are constructed, their color choices, composition, shape language, and rendering style. These are some of the specific images I use for reference. If you compare them to the final drawing, you'll probably notice how much I borrowed from them, especially in terms of colors, lighting, shapes, and overall rendering. If you're interested in a more step-by-step breakdown of how I build backgrounds in Inkscape, I'll leave you a link to some dedicated tutorials in the description. For now, here's the final background. And here is it again with the characters placed on top so you can see how everything comes together. Now let's move on to the animations, which is the part that took me the most time. For this small demo, I ended up making a total of 10 different animations, and even that took a lot longer than I initially expected. At first I wanted to create at least one attack animation for each character, and one damage animation for each enemy, but I quickly realized that wasn't realistic within a reasonable time frame. Let's start with the simplest animation, the torches. These are just small, stylized fire loops that illuminate the dungeon. Without them, the scene feels flat and a bit lifeless. For this animation, I just made the shape, and then used the wave effect. I also drew another shape for the light right below the torch, which I animated using the curve noise modifier. And here is the final result. And here is it again, placed on the background. Next, the characters needed something to do while they wait for player input, so I created idle animations for all 6 of them, starting with the knight. All of the characters use more or less a complete 2D IK rig. If you're interested in how to set that up, I have a step-by-step tutorial that shows the whole process in about 10 minutes, link in the description. The knight follows that exact setup, with one interesting exception. The sword has to be held with both hands at all times. If you move or rotate the sword, both hands need to follow it. This isn't especially difficult, but it does require a few unintuitive extra steps. If you'd like a dedicated tutorial on that, let me know in the comments. It's a really fun setup to work with. Here's the final idle animation for the knight. Next is the assassin. This one was a bit more complex because of the position of the arms, but the rig itself works in the same way. The unique element here is the scarf. I wanted a simple waving motion, so I drew the scarf straight in Inkscape, imported it as a separate grease pencil object, and then applied a wave distortion effect. This is an effect, not a modifier, and it was incredibly easy to set up. With just a bit of tweaking, it gave me exactly the kind of motion I wanted. Here is the finished idle animation for the assassin. Finally, the wizard. The rigging and idle animation are very similar to the others. The main difference is, once again, the IK setup that keeps the hands attached to the staff, allowing me to move the staff freely while the arms follow. Here is the final idle animation for the wizard. Now we get to the fun part, the attack and damage animations. This is where I really pushed things and experimented with a lot of different tricks, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. Let's break it down step by step. First, the wizard's attack animation. For the first 12 frames, it's actually very simple. The character leans slightly forward and pushes the staff ahead to cast the spell. Nothing too fancy here. The interesting part comes next. To sell the power of the attack, I added vibrations using the curve noise modifier. This is great for creating erratic, jittery motion. I applied it to several bones, but especially to the staff bone. Because the staff is connected to the hands through IK, the vibration propagates through the hands and into the arms in a very natural way. But still, the staff itself felt a bit empty. I wanted some visual indication of the origin of the lightning. To do that, I created a new grease pencil object and drew a simple solid circle. Then, in the modifiers tab, I added a noise modifier. Not to confuse with the curves noise modifier. This one affects the shape of the stroke itself, not the animation curve. By tweaking the settings and adding a subdivision modifier, I got a nice unstable spark shape, which I duplicated inside. To sell the idea further, I added a rim effect to the wizard with a light color, as if some illumination were coming from the lighting. And as a final touch, I again made use of the curve noise modifiers to make it shake. To finish the look, I added a quick glow. That final glow really helps sell the energy of the spell. Then comes the lighting itself. This effect took the most experimentation, but it was also one of the most fun to build. I started with a very simple boring lighting shape drawn in Inkscape. After importing it into Blender, I adjusted stroke thickness using sculpt mode so it looks more natural. Then I added a build modifier so the lighting appears to shoot out of the staff, followed by a noise modifier to give it movement. It looked okay, but still a bit static, like it was floating there in place. To fix that, I added an envelope modifier and used the skip segments property. By animating it in an erratic way, the lighting breaks into multiple strands and feels much more alive and chaotic. The final part of the attack is the imp's damage animation. I wanted this to feel very cartoony, with the imp flickering between a shocked expression and an exaggerated X-ray view showing the bones. So I went back to Inkscape and quickly drew an electrocuted face to replace the imp's normal expression, along with some simple skeleton for the body. Looking back, the skeleton doesn't breathe perfectly because of the imp's proportions, but it works well enough for the effect. The electrocution motion itself relies heavily on the curve noise modifiers again, and to get that X-ray effect I added a tint modifier that turns everything black, except for the bones, and then animated it so it flickers on and off. As a final touch, I reused the same sparked effect of the staff to put it behind the character. And here is the full animation. The wizard casting the spell and the imp taking damage. I'm really happy with how this turned out. Alright, now it's time to move everything into the engine. This part will be fairly quick, because this isn't a programming tutorial. I just want to show you how I put everything together in Godot, mainly for the sake of completeness. The interactive element is very simple. You use an arrow to select which character will attack, and then you choose the enemy you want to target. Even though there is only one full attack animation for one character, and a damage animation for one enemy, I thought that interactivity helped create the illusion of a more complete system. The first thing I did was to export the background as a PNG, without the torches, since those need to be separate and placed on top. I then imported the background to a new main scene in Godot. As for the scenes themselves, this was super simple. The torches come first. They have a bit of code so the animations don't play all in sync. Each character also has its own scene. All of them are basically just an animated sprite 2D with an idle animation. Even the attack and damage from the wizard and imp are just a scene with a single animated sprite 2D. The only slightly complicated part of this project was the coding of selecting the character and picking the enemy. With a bit of struggle and a lot of help from ChatGPT, I managed to get it working. Help non-coders to program some prototypes is like the one thing where I think AI is genuinely useful. And here is the final interactive demo of our old school 2D JRPG. I hope you enjoyed this video and that made you a bit more interested in the power of vector illustration for game development. I had a lot of fun making this demo, and if you enjoyed it, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps a lot. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see next, more of these demo style projects, or maybe more step-by-step tutorials. I'm always looking for the right direction for the channel. Also, if you really would like to learn how to draw things like what you saw in this video, I'm talking characters, background art, game art and more, I let you know I have a super bundle with 13 full courses. That's over 70 hours of tutorials on Inkscape, all aimed at beginners, all using keyboard and mouse to draw. Right now it's on a big discount, link in the description. And finally, I know it's been about a month since my last upload. The holidays and a few personal issues got in the way, but I'll do my best to get back to weekly videos from here on out. This video is dedicated to the memory of Simba. Thank you so much, buddy, for being part of our family for 16 years. You were the single best companion anyone could have asked for. We'll miss you forever.